The mid-year content is drawing to a close, but my regulars will know that the fun is not over until we talk about all of the series that I have read or will maybe no longer be reading in 2025. So this is the first part of my mid-year series check-in. Today I'm going to be talking about 17 whole series that I have either completed, I'm currently up to date on, so I've read everything that is published and there's nothing scheduled to be published for the rest of 2025, and the biggest section by far is the series that I have DNF'd. And then in part 2, which should be coming in just a few short days, you will find out about all of the series that I have started this year or I have made progress on that have more books in the series that have been published that I have not gotten to yet. So as I said, 17 series we're going to be talking about today. That is actually 6 more than we discussed at this time last year. And I think that the difference between this year and last year is that I am DNFing even more series. At this point last year, I included the most DNF'd series I had ever included in one of these series check-in videos, and today I am beating that by 5. We have 5 more series that I have DNF'd that I will not be continuing on with. Now, this is mainly because of the projects I've been doing this year. We do still have Shelve It or Scrap It. I'm still delving my TBR, trying to remove the stuff that I'm not interested in and keep all of the stuff that I want to read, as well as any hidden gems that I find along the way. But I also did the romanty rundown, which was essentially starting 12 series, and I did not keep the majority of them. I kept some, but the majority of them I decided I was not going to be continuing on with, and that forms a big part of the DNF section of today's video. But this video is going to be split into sections, and the first section we're going to be talking about is all of the series that I've completed this year. The second is usually the ones that I'm up to date on, and then the third is the DNFs. However, I have no series that I am up to date on that I'm not DNFing this year, which is crazy. So we're doing like a Venn diagram section, which is series that I'm up to date on, but I'm also DNFing before we go into the DNFs. But I don't really feel like you need any more introduction to this video. So I'm going to start talking about some series, starting off with the 2 that I finished. If nothing else, I know that this video is mainly a big pile of negativity, but one positive thing we can talk about in this video is that I finished Wheel of Time, baby. I finished all 14 books and I disliked most of them, but I did it. So if y'all are unfamiliar, the Wheel of Time series is a classic, very hyped, very well loved for some reason, adult epic fantasy series following a classic struggle between the forces of light and dark. The premise of this world is that the calendar is kind of like on a wheel. With every turn of the wheel, there is an age, and in every age, the same events happen. One person who is born into every age is the Dragon Reborn, and this is somebody who is pivotal in this battle between light and dark. He essentially serves as a pawn for these two forces. We also have Tarviran, who are people who are able to alter the weave of the world, the Dragon Reborn being one of these, but we do have a few others that we follow throughout this series as well. So we are following this age's Dragon Reborn as he hopefully tips the world towards the light for good. So I read 14 books in this series. 6 of them are now in my top 10 longest books that I've ever read. I, for the most part, did not enjoy this series, unfortunately, but I was part of a read along, and I ain't no quitter. Mama didn't raise no quitter. So I stuck it out all the way until the end. This is probably my crowning achievement when it comes to reading, because I have read a series longer than Wheel of Time before, but I enjoyed like 95% of those books, whereas this one was a very different reading experience. A lot of you guys are going to be asking me very soon, or have already asked me actually, is Wheel of Time worth it? I personally don't think it is. I think if you're 3 books in and you're not enjoying it, you're probably not going to enjoy it anymore. And I know a lot of people say that the ending is worth it. I don't think it is. I think it peaks at book 12, which is definitely one of the best books in this series. 13 and 14 were not great, and I really, while some of the big moments in here are good, I don't think they outweigh how tedious this entire series is and how like slice of lifey it is in parts. I just realized I pretty much enjoyed nothing, not a single book I'm gonna talk about in this video. I mean, some of them I did enjoy to a degree, just not enough to continue. So like I did technically enjoy some, but yeah, even the ones I finished I didn't love. The other series that I completed is a duology. It's essentially kind of more like 2 connected standalones more than anything, which is The Girl with All the Gifts duology by M.R. Carey. So this one is a zombie story. I read The Girl with All the Gifts many years ago, and I recently did an episode of Shelve It or Scrap It where I went through and essentially finished all of my self-destructing books from 2024, which were all sequels. So I ended up revisiting a bunch of old series that essentially, if I'd have read those series now, they would have been in this video as DNFs, but because I read them many years ago, and like I said, Mama didn't raise no quitter, they ended up being ones that lived on my spreadsheet forever and I have the sequels to. So I did revisit all of those, and this I'm pretty sure is the only one that I finished out of that video, the only series that I finished, essentially because I do find these interesting, but I don't need to keep them. So I guess this is probably the book that we're going to talk about that I enjoyed the most. So The Girl with All the Gifts is set during the zombie apocalypse. I think it's quite a bit, like a couple of decades maybe into the zombie apocalypse at this point. It's set in the UK, and we are set in a military base where they are keeping a zombie child to experiment on. Obviously, we're searching for the cure or the vaccination, I guess, for the zombie virus. And I'm pretty sure that the key, because it was a long time ago that I read it, I'm pretty sure one of the key themes of the book is that we are following this woman who is responsible for like leading this experiment or taking part in it, but she is actually growing quite attached to this zombie girl at the same time. And then The Boy on the Bridge is a prequel series to this that I guess explores the origins of the zombie that we have in The Girl with All the Gifts. It's hard to talk about this duology because at this point I can't remember what exactly is a spoiler, but I really enjoyed it to a point. I think my issue with zombie stories is that I'm always intrigued about the virus itself. Like, how did it start? How did it spread? What is it doing, like scientifically? What is it doing to strengthen itself? How is it evolving? And the impact that this has on a society as a whole, how the society continues on in spite of it. And I tend to find that zombie stories tend to focus on the individual lives of the people affected by the apocalypse as opposed to the apocalypse as a whole. And that is definitely the case with this series. The Boy on the Bridge especially really focused on a bunch of characters that weren't particularly likable, that I didn't really care about. And when it got really impactful and explosive towards the end, it kind of made all of those moments like following the mundane day-to-day lives of these people worth it, but they were still really tedious to read through. So I enjoyed the book as a whole, didn't really love the reading experience, didn't feel the need to hold on to these ones. So for the ones that I'm up to date on and have DNF'd, normally for this they would be books that I'm up to date on where there is not going to be another book in this series published this year. Because I'm DNF in this series, I haven't done a great deal of research, so potentially the sequel to one of these books is going to be published in the latter half of the year. I know that I won't be reading it, and I know that there's only one book published in this series so far, and actually I think one that I can say with confidence is not going to have a sequel release this year because it's a very new release, is The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. So I received an arc of this, and then I also got this in the Fairly Epic Fantasy box, and it's stunning and I love it and it's amazing, but I don't love the contents of the book, which is the problem. So this one is Joe Abercrombie's newest series. It's a grimdark story following a priest who is going to the city because he thinks he's going to get his next big break, like his career defining role. And when he arrives, the Pope tasks him with escorting the heir to a throne, like the lost heir to a throne, to the country that she is going to rule, where she's going to have to oust her family members who are falsely sitting on the throne. And to help him along the way and to help get this girl where she needs to be, he is given the responsibility of a congregation of monsters and devils, including a sorcerer, an elf, a werewolf, a vampire, a cursed knight. And it's kind of like Joe Abercrombie's take on a found family story. I just don't really like his writing style, and I don't like his humor, and it's taken me 11 books to realize that I should just cut my losses with Joe Abercrombie. But in my defense, the first 10 books I read were all in the same world. I wanted to try something different, so I tried The Devils because I did receive an arc of it, and then I knew anyway that it was going to be coming in the Epic box, so I knew it would be one that I ended up with. And sadly it didn't work out for me, but I think a lot of people who love Joe Abercrombie will love this. I think a lot of people looking to try Joe Abercrombie, this is a great starting point. I just know at this point that he's not for me. Another one that I'm relatively confident won't have a sequel release this year, just because it is I think like a March 2025 release. Yes, it's a 2025 release, and that is Firebird by Juliet Cross, which is the first book in the Fire That Binds trilogy, which is a romantasy series with each installment following a different main character and love interest that completes like one story arc. So while we're following different heroines, they're all going to contribute to an overall plot of toppling the Roman Empire. And this is a alternate history where the Roman Empire has still thrived, but the reason why is because they are all dragon shifters, because Romulus and Remus suckled from the teat of a dragon. This one is a slave and master romance, which is a big reason why a lot of people didn't like it. But it also has some questionable representation in here as well. But plot wise, it is about a girl whose family and the village, like where she's from, is destroyed by the Roman Empire. So she ends up, I think, joining the Spartans. And when the Spartans are defeated by Rome, the main character is captured by the emperor's nephew in his dragon form and taken to his estate where she becomes a slave. She's not a typical slave because he is the guy who is trying to overthrow the Roman Empire, and he doesn't believe in the way that the Roman Empire has been corrupted over recent years, and he's trying to build a better Rome. But to maintain a facade so his uncle doesn't know what his plans are, she is technically very much still a slave of his household. So this one, I really liked the fantasy elements of it and the politics, and I kind of wish it had gone more into that, but I think because this is going to follow a different couple in every book, the further it went on, the more it just focused on the romance, and I lost more and more interest in it. So while I wouldn't hate following a sequel in this world, like reading another book, I just don't think I'm ever going to be interested enough to bother picking one up. So the only book in this section that I am actually unsure if there is a sequel coming later this year is Sorcery and Small Magics by Meaga Ducey, which is the first book in the World of Song trilogy. So this one is a kind of like small scope fantasy. It's not quite a cozy fantasy because the stakes are high for the individual characters that play a part in this plot, but it's definitely not an end of world kind of scenario, and we are following two sorcerers called Leo and Sebastian. Yes, indeedy. Look at my memory. Leo comes from this prestigious magical family, but he is not a sorcerer himself. He can't perform powerful magic. However, he does write spells. On the flip side of this, we have Sebastian, who comes from a very poor family. He has no magical lineage to draw on. He just happens to be incredibly gifted himself, and he takes his power and his work very, very seriously. So these two don't get on at all, but they are thrown together for a project. One day, Sebastian performs a spell which he believes is Leo's, but it's actually a paper that's gotten mixed up in his work, and it turns out to be forbidden magic that ends up tying these two very closely together, and they have to go on a quest to look for a reclusive sorcerer to be able to undo the spell before it is too late. So this one was fine. I thought that it was charming. I enjoyed the atmosphere, the writing style. I'm just more of a save the world kind of girly, so the smaller scope of this plot is not one that I'm really interested in pursuing, but I did have a really good time when I was reading this one. And then we have the 12 series that I have DNF'd so far. So this is essentially that I have tried the first book in the series. I didn't DNF the book, I finished it, but I have no desire to continue on and read any more books in the series. So the first one is the Tyrant Soul series by C.L. Wilson. This was actually one of the books that was featured in that episode of Shelve It or Scrap It I was talking about. I started the Tyrant Soul series in 2020, and I got, I think, halfway through the third book and I kind of put it down. So I tried to revisit it for that episode of Shelve It or Scrap It and decided that it just really wasn't for me. So this one is a romantasy series following a Fae King who is looking for a way to save his people, which is something that he cannot do without a maid. So he asks his crystal ball what he's supposed to do, and it sends him to this mortal girl called Elisetta Barastani, which is weird because like a human woman should not be the mate of a Fae King, and they end up embroiled in a plot that awakens a like very contentious war between the mages and the fae of the world. Essentially, the thing that I didn't love about this is that it has very traditional gender roles in it. Like it's very much like the man is a warrior and the woman is a healer, and it just wasn't doing it for me, so I didn't really see the point in continuing. The next one is the Serpent and Dove series by Shelby Maturin. I read the first book probably like 2020 or something, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It was a fun time, but I got got into the second book and I actually read a recap of book one, and I was like thinking, because it's been years, I was like, I'm gonna have forgotten so much about this. Turns out nothing really happens in Serpent and Dove. And I got into the second book and I was reading it. It was fine. It was easily digestible, but I didn't care. So I decided to call it quits. This one is once again a romantasy series. It's a trilogy and it is a romance between a witch and a witch hunter. So our main female character, Lou, is a thief and she is being hunted down by this witch hunter, and they end up in a compromising position on stage where the Pope tells Reed, I think he's called, the guy, he's called like Reed Diggory, tells Reed that he now has to marry this girl to protect his and her honor. So they do, but he doesn't know that she's a witch, and as they start to grow closer to each other, she realizes that if he finds out, their relationship will be over. I also DNF'd the Newsflash series by Myra Grant. I read the first book, which was called Feed. Once again, a few years ago. These are all books that were in that episode of Shelve It or Scrap It. And this one is once again a zombie series centering around how bloggers were the only reliable source of news during the zombie apocalypse. So we are following two bloggers who have been selected to supply the media for a presidential campaign for this up and coming president. So as these two, well, there's more of them, but the main characters are siblings and they're like the main reporters. As they get further and further into this presidential campaign, they uncover a plot to kill the president that might have some deeper seated roots and also some conspiracies attached to it. I didn't like the focus of this once again because I was expecting it to be a zombie story, which it is, but it's actually more of a speculative novel of like how would America continue to run as normal or as normal as possible during a zombie apocalypse. As somebody who is not an American and also not deeply invested and deeply knowledgeable about international politics, it wasn't a topic that was particularly interesting to me, and I did find that it took over most of the book. And then going into the sequel, the characters just have a really obnoxious tone to their voices that I didn't like, and I just didn't care enough to bother continuing at that point. One series that I really wanted to love, but I feel like my time has passed on now, is the Firebird series by Claudia Gray. The first book is 1,000 Pieces of You. It's a book that has lived on my shelves for a very long time, and I kind of just left it too late. I did still enjoy 1,000 Pieces of You, but not to the degree that I was hoping. I would still be open to continuing this in the future. I just don't see it ever really being a priority of mine. But essentially this is about a girl whose father is murdered, and he is the inventor. He's like a physicist, I think, and he invented this device along with her mother to travel through dimensions. So the person responsible for killing him has stolen this device and has run away through the dimensions. So the main character, along with one of her parents' top students, use prototypes to follow her father's killer through dimensions. I thought that it was really fun. I thought that it was very engaging, especially for YA as well. As somebody who's pretty much grown out of it now, I did really enjoy it. I just think the nature of the story is a little bit too fast paced for my personal preference, so I don't see myself prioritizing it. Another book that I enjoyed, I just don't really have an interest in continuing on with the series, is Neon Gods by Katie Roberts. So this is the first book, and I'm sure I've just called this series the Olympus series. Is it the Dark Olympus series? But it is a Hades and Persephone retelling. It's a contemporary romance where the titles of like Hades, Demeter, Zeus are titles. They're not the names of people. They are titles that represent the role that these people play in society. And our main character of Persephone is being wed to Zeus against her will. So she flees to the underworld where she meets Hades, who she previously did not actually think existed. She thought the Hades line had died out. And Hades agrees to fake date Persephone so she can appear to be ruined goods. So Zeus loses interest in her and Hades can gain revenge on Zeus for murdering his family. I like Katie Robert. I think she does what she does well, and what she does is writes very smutty BDSM erotica, essentially. I just think that she repeats like character archetypes and themes and tropes, and I think if you love this, then you will continue to eat up Katie Roberts' books. It's just not something that I love, so I don't want to read it again and again and again. However, other authors that do this, Ali Hazelwood for an example, because I love those. I will read it again and again and again. Katie Robert just isn't that author for me, but if this is something that sounds interesting to you, then I would definitely recommend Katie Robert. I also very sadly DNF'd the Skyward series by Brandon Sanderson, and I really, really love the first book in this series. I just did not love any book that followed it. So the Skyward series is following this girl called Spencer, whose father was a deserter. Now they live on a planet that is constantly at threat of attack from an alien race. So they glorify their pilots. The most important thing on this planet is to be a pilot. So deserting is like the biggest offense that you can commit. And because of Spencer's father deserting, her family have been shunned. Like, they're not allowed to have normal jobs. Everybody makes fun of them. Nobody wants to hang out with Spencer. But all she wants to do is become a pilot, and everybody is fighting her every step of the way because they believe that her family has been essentially tainted because her father deserted. So I really loved book one because I felt like Spencer had a lot of personal growth. There's a found family element, and the plot obviously thickened as well. The problem I had though with the rest of the series is that the sequel is essentially the same as this, with Spencer once again undergoing the same character growth, just on a different planet with a different cast of characters, and book three does the same thing, which is where I DNF'd like halfway through book three. So while I love Brandon Sanderson and I love book one in this series, I will not be finishing this series out. For the Fairy Romantasy books, we actually just have 4, and I feel like this is a good time to say that this is probably not a super accurate list of series that I've DNF'd, because sometimes I finish a book and if I know that I have no intention of continuing on with the series, sometimes I just don't even bother putting it in my spreadsheet because I can't be bothered. And I feel like that is probably the case because I did find 2 books while I was collecting the books for this video where that is the case. So I have added them, but that's not to say there isn't more out there. But the first one that I read for the Fairy Romantasy challenge that I did is Law of the Wilds by Annalisa Brana. This one essentially should be a YA fantasy, and somebody put smut in it for some reason. But it is following, you know what, I can't even tell you what it's about. That's how much of an impact this had on me. It's something to do with Fae and a magic book, and the main character lives in a village that is controlled by the Fae that you're not allowed to escape. It's very Hunger Games in like the first chapter, and she ends up being taken to this Fae Lord to work in a library that the Fae aren't allowed to go in, and he is looking for some magical powerful artifact that of course she finds. I just didn't understand how this ended up in a Romantasy subscription, and I think if it had properly lent into being a YA fantasy, it would have been decent. Probably wouldn't have continued, but it would have been a decent one. The Romantasy, like the explicit sexual content in here, just felt really weird. The Ren and the Holly Library by Kay Lind was kind of a promising one. I was in 2 minds whether I wanted to continue on with this, because I thought that it had good sexual tension throughout the first half, but then I did feel like that kind of fizzled out in the second half. But this one is a story inspired by Beauty and the Beast, where we are following, is she a human woman? Yes, she is a street thief, and she is sent to steal something from this manor house, and when she gets there, she finds out that this supernatural creature lives there, and he is very confused as to how she got into his house, because she should have triggered like 100 different wards. But instead of turning her in for breaking the treaty between humans and monsters, he actually hires her for a job of his own. This was very middle of the road for me. There were things that I liked about it, but ultimately I felt like I wouldn't be driven to continue. And lo and behold, a couple of months after I read it, I no longer have interest in this series, so I won't be carrying on. Nectar of the Wicked by Ella Fields was also one that could have gone either way, but ultimately I found the darker content to be a little too gratuitous in here, and I ended up really not liking that element of it. So this one is following a changeling girl who was raised in the land between the lands of the Fae and the humans, and her human mother absolutely hates her, but she's looked after her so that when she comes of age, she can then trade her back to the Fae for her human daughter. However, when this girl comes of age, the Fae tell her that they can't help her, there is no human daughter to swap back, and so the woman starts to create a fuss and the Fae ultimately kill her, which leaves our main character now having to fend for herself. So she ends up going to work at the brothel where her mother worked, and she is discovered by a Fae king. She doesn't know that he's a Fae king, but he offers her marriage, and if she agrees to marry him, then he says that he will help her find her Fae family and take her to the realms of the Fae. This is pretty dark in terms of like, I want to say like torture and degradation content, and that is what I thought went a little bit too far. It also has a not very nice love interest. Like, he's not even a bit nice. Like, he wasn't doing it for me. He wasn't nice at all. The last of the romancy ones is A Curse of Blood and Wolves by Melissa McTurnan. This one is a paranormal Little Red Riding Hood retelling where, of course, Little Red falls in love with the wolf. That is all I have to say about it. It has some like stalking kink in it, if that's for you. Not for me, but the main character loved it. And that is pretty much all I remember about it. I don't like paranormal. This one was pretty like surface level as it was. And it's also the first book in a series where every book follows a different couple, which is also not my preference. Even if I would have had a good time with this one, I doubt I would have continued. And then the last two books I'm going to talk about are two Chinese fantasies that I read on my trip to China in April. Both of them had positives and negatives, but didn't leave a lasting impression on me. The first of which is Of Jade and Dragons by Amber Chen. This one is following a girl who lives in a small community, and her father, who is a very popular engineer in this community, is killed, and she wants to get to the bottom of why. Like, she doesn't understand why anybody would want to kill an engineer. So she disguises herself as her brother and goes to the Engineers Guild that her father was a part of to try and find out if anybody there has any information or is responsible. And she also gets to live out her dream of following in her father's footsteps, which is a career path that was previously inaccessible to her as a first daughter of her family. So I thought that the world was really interesting in here. It has like a steampunk element of it. I enjoyed the writing to a degree. I just didn't really ever get absorbed in this one, and I didn't really love the characters either. I also felt like the Engineers Guild was underutilized, and we could have lent into that like a whole lot more. And then the other one is The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song. This one is a Mulan retelling following a girl whose father is an opium addict, and he plans to sell her to this cruel merchant as his bride to make some money to help him pay off some of his debts that he's amassed through his opium addiction. And our main character has tolerated a cruel father for a long time, but she goes to check out this guy she's supposed to be married to and finds him, like, I think he's beaten like one of his household staff, and this is not a future that she can tolerate for herself anymore. So she disguises herself as a boy and she joins the army, where she has to work twice as hard as anybody else compared to all of the men around her. This one, I didn't really love the writing, didn't love the plot. There is a love triangle element in here though, with, I mean, the character art in this perfectly illustrates why I want to continue on with this series, just to see how this situation develops. But unfortunately, I just really wasn't invested in this book at all, so it's just truly not worth me continuing. So those were the 17 series that I have completed, I'm up to date on, or for the most part have DNF'd in 2025. Let me know. I don't know what to let me know actually, because I'm like, let me know if you enjoyed any of these series when I pretty much did not enjoy any of them. I mean, some of them I did, I just didn't feel invested enough to continue, which I think is fine. It has been a very slow progression. Like, I feel like I've gone through some character growth, accepting and admitting that I don't have to continue on with every series. Even if I enjoy the first book, if I don't want to read any more, then that's absolutely fine. So I'm happy that we're at this point now. But if you guys would like to let me know that you were here but you don't feel like you have anything to say, leave me a dragon emoji for The Night Ends with Fire. Also, don't forget to check back in a couple of days for part 2 of my mid-year series check-in, which is going to be much more positive because it is the series that I want to continue on with, the ones that I have many more books to read. So I do hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you have, please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna. If you head into my description box, you'll find a link to my Goodreads, my Instagram, and my Patreon if you'd like to follow me on any of those. But that's it from me today, guys. Bye!
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you'll go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.